Political liberty. What are we to understand by that? Perhaps the individual's independence of the state and its laws? No. On the contrary, the individual's subjection in the state and to the state's laws. But why liberty? Because one is no longer separated from the state by intermediaries, but stands in direct and immediate relation to it, because one is a citizen, not the subject of another, not even of the king as a person, but only in this quality as supreme head of the state. Political liberty, this fundamental doctrine of liberalism, is nothing but a second phase of Protestantism, and runs quite parallel with religious liberty. Or would it perhaps be right to understand by the latter an independence of religion? Anything but that. Independence of intermediaries is all that it is intended to express. Independence of mediating priests, the abolition of the laity, and so direct and immediate relation to religion, or to God. Only on the supposition that one has religion can he enjoy freedom of religion. Freedom of religion does not mean being without religion, but inwardness of faith, unmediated intercourse with God. To him who is religiously free, religion is an affair of the heart. It is to him his own affair. It is to him a sacred, serious matter. So, too, to the politically free man, the state is sacred, serious matter. It is his heart's affair, his chief affair, his own affair. Political liberty means that the polis, the state, is free. Freedom of religion, that religion is free, as freedom of conscience signifies that conscience is free. Not, therefore, that I am free from the state, from religion, from conscience, or that I am rid of them. It does not mean my liberty, but the liberty of a power that rules and subjugates me. It means that one of my despots, like state, religion, conscience, is free. State, religion, conscience, these despots make me a slave, and their liberty is my slavery. That is, this they necessarily follow the principle, the end hallows the means, is self-evident. If the welfare of the state is the end, war is a hallowed means. If justice is the state's end, homicide is a hallowed means, and is called by its sacred name execution. The sacred state hallows everything that is serviceable to it. Individual liberty, over which civic liberalism keeps jealous watch, does not mean by any means signify a completely free self-determination by which actions become altogether mine, but one only independence of persons. Individually free is he who is responsible to no man. Taken in this sense, and we are not allowed to understand it otherwise, not only the ruler is individually free, i.e. irresponsible toward men, before God, we know, he acknowledges himself responsible, but all who are responsible only to the law. This kind of liberty was run through the revolutionary movement of the century to win independence of arbitrary will, or test el nostre plaisir. Hence the constitutional prince must himself be stripped of all personality, deprived of all individual decision, and that he may not as a person, as an individual man, violate the individual liberty of others. The personal will of the ruler has disappeared in the constitutional prince. It is with a right feeling, therefore, that absolute princes resist this. Nevertheless, these very ones profess to be in the best sense Christian princes. For this, however, they must become a purely spiritual power, as the Christian is subject only to spirit. God is spirit. The purely spiritual power is consistently represented only by the constitutional prince, he who, without any personal significance, stands there spiritualized to the degree that he can rank as a sheer uncanny spirit, as an idea. The constitutional king is the truly Christian king, the genuine, consistent carrying out of the Christian principle. In the constitutional monarchy, individual dominion, i.e. a real ruler that wills, has found its end. Here, therefore, individual liberty prevails, independence of every individual dictator, of everyone who could dictate to me with a tel est notre plaisir. It is the compelled Christian state life, a spiritualized life. The behavior of the commonalty is liberal through and through. Every personal invasion of another sphere revolts the civic sense. If the citizen sees that one is dependent on the humor, the pleasure, the will of a man as individual, as not authorized by a higher power, at once he brings his liberalism to the front and shrieks about arbitrariness. In fine, The citizen asserts his freedom from what is called orders. No one has any business to give me orders. Orders carries the idea that what I am to do is another man's will, while law does not express the personal authority of another. The liberty of the commonality is liberty or independence from the will of another person, so-called personal or individual liberty. For being personally free means being only so free that no other person can dispose of mine, or that what I may or may does not depend on the personal decree of another. The liberty of the press, e.g., is such a liberty of liberalism, liberalism fighting only against the coercion of the censorship as that of personal willfulness, but otherwise showing itself extremely inclined and willing to tyrannize over the press by press laws, i.e. the civic liberals want liberty of writing for themselves, for, as they are law-abiding, their writings will not ride them under the law. Only liberal matter, i.e. only lawful matter, is to be allowed to be printed. Otherwise, the press laws threaten press penalties. If one sees personal liberty assured, one does not notice at all how, if a new issue happens to arise, that the most glaring unfreedom becomes dominant. For one is rid of orders, indeed, and no one has any business to give us orders, but one has become so much the more submissive to the law. One is enthralled now in due legal form. In the citizen state, there are only free people who are compelled to thousands of things, to deference, a confession of faith, etc. But what does the amount to? Why, it is only the state, the law, not any man, that compels them. What does the commonality mean by inveighing against every personal order, every order not founded on the cause, on reason? It is simply fighting in the interest of the cause, against the dominion of persons. But the mind's cause is the rational, good, lawful, etc. That is the good cause. The commonality wants an impersonal ruler. Furthermore, if the principle is this, that only the cause is to rule man, to wit, the cause of morality, the cause of legality, etc., then no personal balking of one by the other may be authorized either, as formerly the commoner was balked of the aristocratic officers, the aristocrat of common mechanical trades, etc. Free competition must exist. Only through the thing can one balk another, the rich man balking the impecunious man by money, a thing, not as a person. Henceforth, only on lordship, the lordship of the state is admitted. Personally, no one is any longer lord of another. Even at birth, the children belong to the state, and to the parents only in the name which, e.g., does not allow infanticide, demands their baptism, etc. But all the state's children, furthermore, are of quite equal account in its eyes, civic or political equality, and they may see to it themselves how they get along with each other. They may compete. Free competition means nothing else that everyone can present himself, assert himself, fight against another. Of course, the feudal party set itself against this, as its existence depended on an absence of competition. The contest in the time of the Restoration in France had no other substance than this, that the bourgeoisie was struggling for free competition, and the feudalists were seeking to bring back the guild system. Now, free competition has won, and against the guild system it had to win. If the revolution ended in a reaction, this only showed that the revolution really was. For every effort arrives at a reaction when it comes to discreet reflection, and storms forward in the original action only so long as it is an intoxication and an indiscretion. Discretion will always be the cue of the reaction, because discretion sets limits and liberates what was really wanted. The principle from the initial unbridledness and unrestrainedness, while young fellows, bumptious students, who set aside all considerations, are really Philistines, since with them, as with the latter, considerations from the substance of their conduct only that as swaggers, they are mutinous against considerations and in negative relations to them. But as Philistines, later, they give themselves up to considerations and have positive relations to them. In both cases, all their doing and thinking turns upon considerations. But the Philistine is reactionary, in relation to the student. He is the wild fellow come to discreet reflection, as the latter is the unreflecting Philistine. Daily experience confirms the truth of this transformation, and shows how the swaggerers turn to Philistines in turning gray. So, too, the so-called reaction in Germany gives proof that it was only the discreet continuation of the warlike jubilation of liberty. The revolution was not directed against the established, but against the establishment in question, against a particular establishment. It did away with this ruler, not with the ruler. On the contrary, the French were ruled more inexorably. It killed the old vicious rulers, but wanted to confer on the virtuous ones a securely established position. It's simply virtue in the place of vice. Vice and virtue, again, on the part distinguished from each other only as a wild young fellow from a Philistine. To this day, the revolutionary principle has gone no farther to assail only one or another particular establishment, i.e., be reformatory. Much as may be improved, strongly as discreet progress may be adhered to, always there is only a new master set in the old one's place, and the overturning is a building up. We are still at the distinction of the young Philistine from the old one. The revolution began in bourgeois fashion with the uprising of the third estate, the middle class. In bourgeois fashion, it dries away. It was not the individual man, and he alone is man, that became free, but the citizen, the citoyen, the political man, who, for that very reason, is not man, but a specimen of the human species, more particularly a specimen of the species citizen, a free citizen. In the Revolution, it was not the individual who acted so as to affect the world's history, but a people, the nation, the sovereign nation, wanted to affect everything. A fancied I, an idea. The nation appears acting. The individuals contribute themselves as tools of this idea, and act as citizens. The commonality has its power and at the same time its limits. In the fundamental law of the state, in a charter, in a legitimate prince who himself is guided and rules according to rational laws, in short, in legality. The period of the bourgeoisie is ruled by the British spirit of legality, an assembly of provincial estates, is ever recalling that his authorization goes only so and so far, and that it is called at all only through favor and can be thrown out against through disfavor. It is always reminding itself of its vocation. It is certainly not to be denied that my father begot me, but now that I am once begotten, surely his purposes in begetting do not concern me a bit, and whatever he may have called me to, I do what I myself will. Therefore, even a called assembly of estates, the French Assembly in the beginning of the Revolution, recognized quite rightly that it was independent of the caller. It existed, and would have been stupid if it did not avail itself of the right of existence, but fancied itself dependent as on a father. The called one no longer has to ask, what did the caller want when he created me, but what do I want after I have once followed the call? Not the caller, not the constituents, not the charter according to which their meeting was called out. Nothing will be called to him a sacred, inviolable power. He is authorized for everything that is in his power. He will know no restricted authorization, will not want to be loyal. This, if any such thing could be expected from chambers at all, would give a completely egoistic chamber, severed from all naval string and without consideration. The chambers are always devout, and therefore one cannot be surprised if so much halfway or undecided, hypocritical egoism parades in them. The members of the estates are to remain within the limits that are traced for them by the charter, by the king's will, etc. If they will not or cannot do that, then they are to step out. What dutiful man could act otherwise, could put himself, his conviction, and his will as the first thing, who could be so moral to want to assert himself, even if the body, corporate, and everything should go to ruin over it? People keep carefully within the limits of their authorization. Of course, one must remain within the limits of his power anyhow, because no one can do more than he can. My power, or if it can be so, powerlessness, be my sole limit, but authorizations only restraining, precepts. Should I profess this all-subversive view? No, I am a law-abiding citizen. The commonality professes a morality which is most closely connected with its essence. The first demand of this morality is to effect that one should carry on a solid business, an honorable trade, lead a moral life. Immoral to it is the sharper, the demirep, the thief, robber, and murderer, the gamester, the penniless man without a situation, the frivolous man. The dowdy commoner designates the feeling against these immoral people as his deepest indignation. All these lack settlement, the solid quality of business, a solid, seemly life, a fixed income, etc. In short, they belong because their existence does not rest on a secure basis to the dangerous individuals or isolated persons. To the dangerous proletariat, they are individual ballers who offer no guarantee and have nothing to lose, and so nothing to risk. The forming of family ties binds a man. He who is bound furnishes security, can be taken hold of, not so the street walker. The gamester stakes everything on the game, rooms himself and others. No guarantee. All who appear to the commoner suspicious, hostile, and dangerous might be comprised under the same vagabonds. Every vagabondish way of living displeases him, for they are intellectual vagabonds too, to whom the hereditary dwelling place of their fathers seems too cramped and oppressive for them to be willing to satisfy themselves with the limited space any more. Instead of keeping within the limits of a temperate style of thinking, and taking as inviolable truth what furnishes comfort and tranquility to thousands, they overlap all bounds of the traditional and run wild with their impudent criticism and untamed mania for doubt. And these extravagating vagabonds, they form the class of the unstable, restless, changeable, of the proletariat, and if they give voice to their unsettled nature, are called unruly fellows. Such a broad sense as the so-called proletariat or pauperism, how much one would err if one believed the commonality to be desirous of doing away with poverty, pauperous, to the best of its ability. On the contrary, the good citizen helps himself with the incomparably comforting conviction that the fact is that the good things of fortune are unequally divided and will always remain so, according to God's wise decree. The poverty which surrounds him in every alley does not disturb the true commoner further than that at most he clears his account with it by throwing in alms, or finds work and food for an honest and serviceable fellow. But so much the more does he feel his quiet enjoyment clouded by innovating and discontented poverty, by those poor who no longer believe quietly and endure, but begin to run wild and become restless. Lock up the vagabond, thrust the breeder of unrest into the darkest dungeon. He wants to arouse dissatisfaction and incite people against existing institutions in the state. Stone him! Stone him! But from these identical discontented ones comes a reasoning somewhat as follows. It need not make any difference to the good citizens who protects them and their principles, whether an absolute king or a constitutional one, a republic, if only they are protected. And what is their principle, whose protector they always love? Not that of labor, not that of birth either, but that of mediocrity, of the golden mean, a little birth and a little labor, and interest-bearing possession. Possession here is the fixed, the given, inherited. Interest drawing is the exertion about it, labor. Labor in capital, therefore. Only no immoderation, no ultra, no radicalism. Right of birth, certainly, but only hereditary possessions. Labor, certainly, yes, little or none at all of one's own, but labor of capital and of the subject laborers. If an age is imbued with an error, some always derive advantage from the error, while the rest have to suffer from it. In the Middle Ages, the error was general among Christians that the Church must have all power, or the supreme lordship on earth. The hierarchs believe in this truth, not less than the laymen, and both were spellbound in the like error. But by it the hierarchs had the advantage of power, the laymen had to suffer subjection. However, as the saying goes, one learns wisdom by suffering, And so the layman at last learned wisdom and no longer believed in the medieval truth. A like relation exists between the commonalty and the laboring class. Commoner and laborer believe in the truth of money. They do not possess it, believe in it no less than those who possess it. The layman, therefore, as well as the priests. Money governs the world is the keynote of the civic epoch. A destitute aristocrat and a destitute laborer as starvelings amount to nothing so far as political consideration is concerned. Birth and labor do not do it, but money brings most consideration. The possessors rule, but the state trains up from the destitute its servants, to whom, in proportion as they are to rule, in its name, it gives money. I receive everything from the state. Have I anything with the state's assent? What I have without this, it takes from me as soon as it discovers the lack of a legal title. Do I not, therefore, have everything through its grace, its assent? On this alone, on the legal title, the commonalty rests. The commoner is what he is through the protection of the state, through the state's grace. He would necessarily be afraid of losing everything if the state's power were broken. But how is it with him who has nothing to lose? How with the proletarian? As he owes nothing to lose, he does not need the protection of the state for his nothing. He may gain on the contrary if that protection of the state is withdrawn from the protege. Therefore, the non-possessor will regard the state as a power protecting the possessor, which privileges the latter, but does nothing for him. The non-possessor, but to suck his blood. The state is a commoner's state, is the state of the commonalty. It protects man not according to his labor, but according to his tractableness, to wit, according to whether the rights entrusted to him by the state are enjoyed and managed in accordance with the will, i.e., laws of the state. Under the regime of the commonalty, the laborers always fall in the hands of the possessors, of those who have at their disposal some bit of the state domains, and everything possessible in state domains belongs to the state, and is only a fief of the individual, especially money and land, of the capitalist, therefore. The laborer cannot realize on his labor to the extent of the value that it has for the consumer. Labor is badly paid. The capitalist has the greatest profit from it. Well paid and more than well paid are only the labors of those who heighten the splendor and dominion of the state, the labors of high state servants. The state pays well that its good citizens, the possessors, may be able to pay badly without danger. It secures to itself by good payments its servants, out of whom it forms a protecting power, a police. To the police belong soldiers, officials of all kinds, those of justice, education, etc. In short, the whole machinery of the state. For the good citizens, and the good citizens gladly pay high tax rates to it in order to pay so much lower rates to their laborers. But the class of laborers, because unprotected in what they essentially are, for they do not enjoy the protection of the state as laborers, but as its subjects they have a share in the enjoyment of the police, a so-called protection of the law, remain a power hostile to this state, the state of possessors, the citizen kingship. Its principal, labor, is not recognized as to its value. It is exploited, a spoil of the possessors, the enemy. The laborers have the most enormous power in their hands, and, if they once became thoroughly conscious of it and used it, nothing would withstand them. They would only have to stop labor, regard the product of labor as theirs, and enjoy it. This is the sense of the labor disturbances which shows themselves here and there. The state rests on the slavery of labor. If labor becomes free, the state is lost.